Welcome to this video where we are going to go through the PAT for 2025 for grade 10 for IT, Information Technology. This is our discussion topic video as well as just talking about how you get started and what to do and get involved. So let's have a look at the PAT for grade 10. So grade 10, this is probably the first time that you're doing a PAT. So just so that you understand, the main thing about the PAT is that it is a way to show off your skills. You would have learned a whole bunch of skills throughout this year and are still learning, and you're going to use the PAT to show off everything that you've learned. It's a great way to use the PAT to revise some of those skills. And by doing the PAT, you're probably going to start to see how everything fits together. And I really want to emphasize it counts quite a bit of marks. Make sure that you do it because you want to develop good habits now that you put a lot of effort into your PAT, because when you get to grade 12, it counts so much for the end of the year. You want to make sure that you're getting great marks for your PAT so that you get a great mark at the end of matric. So let's talk about it. There are 10 tasks that they talk about. The first one is just basically talking about the topic, which doesn't give you any marks, but these are the 10 tasks. Now, technically, these tasks are divided up. It's not really seen here, but there are actually two phases. So this phase over here, 1 to 5, is actually a document that you are going to create, your requirements and design document, where you are planning the program that you are going to create. And then the implementation is you physically making the program, and then some documentation at the end. Some of it's in the program, some is out, so you can help the people that are using your program. So those are the steps. So this is technically phase 1, task 1 to 5, and phase 2 is technically 6 to 10. They talk about that your tasks 1 to 5 should not be later than the end of term 3. So you can probably start it soon. Make sure by the end of term 3 that you're done. And then your task 6 to 10, not later than 3 weeks before the exam start. These dates are obviously just dependent on your teacher. Your teacher will tell you when these dates are due. So make sure that you ask them for that information, because they will know exactly when they want to get those different tasks. You can see how they've divided up the mark allocation. So there you can see 40 marks for the phase 1, which is task 1 to 5, the documentation, 40 marks for phase 2, and then 20 marks for an overall impression. So a total of 100 marks. The PAT counts 20% of your final mark. So therefore it can make a big difference between you getting, for example, an A or a B if you do well in your PAT. And if you're struggling with IT, the PAT is a great way to bring their mark up. So don't neglect the PAT. So what is the topic, Mr. Long? Well, the topic is software to support learning and teaching. So that's the general idea. They're going to talk about it over here. They're going to give you some ideas. So you are developing an educational software, a program that addresses a specific learning area faced by your peers. You're creating a programming focused on a specific learning area. It should have a user interface, should cater to educational needs, have interactive tools. So that's what we are looking at. So here we've got some examples. And what's nice is they've actually given you some websites that you can look at to see what those programs look like. So developing a spelling practice app, or a maths quiz, or a vocab builder, programming tutorial program. Doesn't necessarily have to be Delphi that you're teaching. You could teach Scratch or maybe another programming language, maybe a flashcard app, a calculator that performs basic arithmetic. They're all happy with that. Language learning, a science experiment simulator, historical timeline creator, or a mobile game to help a learner. Maybe there's some sort of quiz that you can do. So they give you a whole bunch of websites that you can go to. My suggestion, once you've decided on what your topic is going to be, what your idea for your program is, remember there are probably lots of other programs that are very similar to that. You do not need to recreate the wheel. Go and research other programs. Go see how they do things. If you're doing a maths game, go look at other maths games to get ideas. Find out what they do well, find out what they do badly, and that you can improve on, and incorporate that in your program. By seeing how other programs work in that sphere, it'll give you an idea of what your program must look like and what it must do. They talk about you need to obviously create your program in Delphi. You need a word processing program to do your analysis, and you obviously need to back up your data regularly. Please make sure that it is your own work. Do not get help from others without acknowledging it. It has to be your own work. You can't get other people to do your PAT. Don't copy other PATs, because if you do, you're going to get naught for it. So make sure that you do the PAT yourself. It must have a graphical user interface. There must be at least 2 screens they talk about. So you could have this as tab sheets, you could have this as panels that pop up, but you must have 2 screens, and it must have good HCI. In other words, good design. It looks nice. The buttons are all the same size. They all look in the same area. They all look fancy, and the color schemes are good. So make it look professional. That's basically what I want you to say. That means make it look like a proper professional program. There are optional things like text files, arrays, and dynamic objects if you want to, but that normally comes from grade 11. So let's just go through the task note your teacher will go through with you. They actually give you a document, a template called annexure, which I've got over here. So here is the annexure over here where you can write in your details. So you can use this template. I'll put links to it in the video description. And they try to lay out every task for you. So the user requirements, you want to clearly outline the objective of the task. So they tell you what to do. So here they've got 3 headings here. They talk about understanding the needs of the task that you have chosen, the solution, and a scope. So what they basically, when I say about the needs of the program, that normally tells you what is the problem, what is the needs that people need. We need a maths game that can help students learn how to do basic arithmetic in our primary schools. You make up a problem because every program is a solution to a problem, because that's why we call it problem solving. So have a paragraph that describes the problem. Remember, if you don't have a problem, make one up. Make it that there's a scenario that your program is going to help fix. Then your second paragraph is going to say, this is the solution. We need a program that can help test students and do this. So you can talk about what a program would need to be able to do in order for it to solve that problem. That will be your second paragraph. And then your third paragraph is a brief description of the scope. Here's where you're going to write down all the specific things that your program needs to do. It needs to allow users. So you're going to basically go into a bit of detail here from a programmer's perspective. The users are going to be able to enter in their details. They're going to be able to choose the level. They're going to be able to then test their knowledge on the different questions. They're going to get feedback on the answers. It's going to rate, like you give them specifically the details of the scope. It's slightly different to the solution. The solution is like an overview. I like to think of it as the solution is what you would do if you were explaining the program to someone who doesn't understand programming. What's the general idea of the programming? Where here the scope is how you would describe it to a fellow programmer, so they know exactly what the different steps are. Then you need task 1B, you need user stories. They give it to you like this. You say, as a what, I would like to something so that I can something. So here's your user stories. They give you some examples. This is a user is the target audience. So our user is the target audience. Who is using it? The students are probably going to be our users. So as a student, I want to change the levels so that I can test myself at various skill levels or something along those lines. They give you some examples of what the nouns are. They could be over here, learners, students, and they give you some ideas of verbs. I want to what? Have a specific goal or purpose. I want to support. I want to create. I want to focus. As a student, I want to be asked questions so that I can see if I can answer them correctly. Things like that. So they give you an example over here. As a programming enthusiast, I aim to support community members by developing education with the user interface in their native language. So you need to create at least 2 user stories. Then our acceptance test, which is task 2, we're going to use the user stories to identify the goals. So the system shall ask for the user for a number. The system shall randomly select a question. So we need at least 4 acceptance tests to be identified. So that is our next page here. You can either do the acceptance test or you can just go complete the sentence below. The system shall do this. The system shall do this. This is how we know that the system shall allow us to select different levels of questions. The system shall indicate to us if we got the question correct or wrong. The system shall tell us how many questions we got correct in total. Things like that. Those are the examples of what your sentences are going to be. I think this is easier to do than that, but you can decide how you want to do it. The acceptance test is like, how does the programmer know that the user stories have been satisfied? So when you look at your user stories, you're going to say, for that to have happened, this is the acceptance test. How do we know that that first user story is successful? We're going to write here, if it was completed, then this is what would happen. So that's how you can write your acceptance test. As I said, this makes a little bit more sense to me. I would prefer doing that. Navigation and description of a flow diagram. Here they talk about your 2 different screens. Now you can write down here in details using text boxes. You can say what the screen is and it flows to this screen, what the screen does. You can draw arrows that go between them. You can list what happens on those screens. So just basically indicate what the screen is, what's going to happen on it, and it flows to this screen and what's going to happen there, and it does a flow back. If you need more screens, you can click on this and just copy it. And then maybe you've got a situation where you go from that screen to that screen to that screen. You need at least 2 different screens. Put it in a text box over here. Write down what the screen is. Maybe underneath it, list what the things are that are going to happen on the screen, what's going to happen on that screen, and then draw arrows saying it goes to this screen. Does it go back to that screen? Then you need an arrow that goes both ways. Maybe it goes to a third screen. Then task 4A is our graphical user interface, where we're going to talk about what the screens are going to look like. They give you this design, so you can actually design your screen here using paper, drawing it, or you can actually paste your actual screen design here, and then you could use this to label your components. You can drag a little line to all the buttons. You can drag a little line if you want. Use this so that you're indicating what components are used where. So you could use that as your first screen, and then here is your second screen. You put your screen there and drag the arrows from that component to what it is. There's a button in this one. Not all of them are going to be used, but those that are used, you're going to have arrows. I would suggest using different colors for the arrows. So like your button arrows will be red and your label arrows will be green, just so it's a bit easier to follow where the arrows are going. Make sure that you use appropriate color design. Make sure that you have helpful messages, that it's easy, it flows nicely, that it looks nice. Make sure that you use good screen design. Yeah. Now over here for task 4B, they ask you to have a data dictionary where they talk about the variables and the components. Applications contain a variety of variables. We need to know what variable type they are and what the components are. Are they local and global variables, and the naming conventions and the variables and components. So they don't actually give space for this in the document that they give you. And I'm wondering if they want to incorporate that in the Annexure 5. But what I would actually do, add a new page to your annexure. This is going to be 4B, data dictionary. And then what I need is something to keep track of my variables and something to keep track of my components. So for the variables, we need to know what the variable is, what its type is, if it's local or global. So what I would do is I would put in a table. Let's put in 4 columns there. We'd have the variable and then the name of the variable, the data type, and local or global. So for example, we might have a variable for your answer. So the answer for the question. Now, if it's a maths game, it's going to be some sort of integer. So I'll make it an integer variable, and the name I'm going to use our answer, and that will be a local variable. I would just not make that bold. So I'll do something like that and list all your variables. Then in another table, we need to keep track of our components. So here we only need 3 columns. So we could have, for example, maybe we're going to enter in the user's name into an edit box. So we want the user's name. We're going to get it from an edit box. So that's going to be called EDT name, and component type is going to be a T edit. Remember, all your components start with T something. And maybe we're going to pick a level based on a radio group. So the level indicator, that's coming from radio group level, and that's going to be a T radio group. So that's what I would incorporate into your annexure if you haven't got it already. That way you can have your data dictionary. They talk about other data structures. If you are using them, you can just write about them, about what they are, but they are optional. So then we move on to our last one, which is task 5, which is the IPO table. This goes into more detail in grade 11 and grade 12, but here they've given us a little bit of a table over here. So basically we need to specify the data type, source of information, which we technically did a little bit of already in our data dictionary, but we must include these 2 things: validation of the input and check-in mechanisms. Then we need to specify the processing that needs to be done of at least 2 algorithms and provide a clear description of the input and at least 2 of the interfaces. So you almost need to do 2 tables, one for one screen and one for the other. So the type of input, for example, I'm just using this as an example, is we're going to enter in our answer for question. Now you'll notice here they want the format, the data types, the source of the input. So this, I'm going to say this is an integer for the data type, format is a number, and it's coming from the keyboard. If there's any validation, so for example, we are doing a maths game, and let's say check if the answer is not left out, and I'll also check if the number is between 0 and 100. Maybe there's a limit on what the type of answers they can enter in. So you would have your different validation checks. Now the processing, we want to check if the answer equals, so we will do some sort of code here. So I just gave an example of some code here. I wrote like a little pseudocode here. So for example, we get the input, we calculate the answer. If the input and the answer are the same, then we display correct and we increase the correct variable because we need to keep track of how many they got right. Else we display incorrect and increase the incorrect variable, something along those lines. Obviously, you'll make it more complicated. If you want to use Delphi code here instead, you can. And then output is what is being displayed. Now this includes your error messages. So we could have a show message that displays the text, which I'll put over here under brackets. So we have a show message that's going to display, please enter an answer. That's going to be text. And then maybe we're going to display the correct or incorrect in a label. So correct or incorrect will be an LBL answer. So it's either the text correct or wrong is displayed. So it's something along those lines. I just gave a brief example, but you can fill all of that out. Make sure you do it for both screens. So you may want to copy this for the one screen and then copy it again for the second screen. Make sure that you include as much as possible. You need at least 2 algorithms that you are processing. So go through it bit by bit and fill out as much information as you can. And then that will finish your phase 1, which is the task 5. And then you can submit this all together as one document. Make sure that you've got clear paragraphs for Annexure 1 as well as your user stories. Make sure that you've got the system shells for task 2. Make sure that you've indicated the flow of the screens, what screen's going to what's happening on the screens. Then you show off those 2 screens and your data dictionary. Don't forget that as well. And then your RPO tables. And then that's your phase 1 done. Then you can get into the actual programming part. This is where you're going to create the 2 screens in Delphi, design them nicely, and develop the code. Making sure that you have good programming techniques. Make sure that you use loops and conditional loops, that you generate good output. Remember, you're practicing your input, process, output. Make use of the correct components. You might have to do some string handling. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say string handling or conditional loops, it might be because you haven't done it yet. So obviously you'll get to that part still, but you're going to incorporate that into your pat. So this is basically designing the program, making it work the way you want. This is probably going to take the most amount of time. Task 9, you're going to basically validate if your program is working. Test every button, make sure that you've tried different types of input, even if the input that's not supposed to go in, to see that it still works. Try different combinations of clicks and characters. Make sure that you test everything. Maybe get another person to try out your program to see if they can make your program crash. So that's your testing, and then your documentation. So when they talk about the documentation, there are 2 parts here: what the program does and how to use or interact with the program. So for that part, I would suggest you just make a Word document and you put your screens and you'd explain what you must do to play your game. That's almost like your help file that you would get. For example, if you play PlayStation games, you get that little pamphlet that tells you how to play the game. You are going to create that. It doesn't have to be as long as that. It can be a simple one. Keep it short. It's only a couple of marks, but just have a screen. Say when you want to start the game, you click on this button. Once you've done that, you can answer questions here. Your results will go here. When you want to start a new game, you can just give a basic idea, maybe a page or 2 explaining how to use your program, because that's going to be the document that you include with your project notes. The other thing is what the program does. That is going to be the notes you write in your code. So wherever you do code, you must put in that / that goes green and write what is happening in this part of the code. What's happening in this part? What's happening in that part? Write green all over your code. Make sure that you've explained all the different parts of the program. Explain what are variables for if it's unsure. You want to have lots of green in your code so that, for example, if someone else or your teacher goes through your code, they can understand what is happening there or what the intention of the code is. So you need to write your project notes in the code as well. So those are the 2 things that you need there. And then you need your declarations, which we'll talk about at the end. Your teachers might do an interview your teacher will do an interview with you. They'll schedule a time where they'll ask you questions about your code. And remember those notes I told you about, those green comments? That's what's going to help you, because if they ask you, what is this code doing? You'll have your green notes there. It's almost like a cheat sheet. You say, this is what that code's doing. So this is a way to demonstrate your program and to explain to them what all the different things are doing. So just have a look at the rubric quickly. Defining the task, 4 marks. Do you see how easy it is? If you've got all 4 points, just make note. We spoke about 3 paragraphs. We just need to also include the topic. Make sure that you list the topic. Then you get all 4 points. You get 4 points. Your use case diagrams. Have you got at least 2 types of users? Have you mentioned this is your user stories? If you've done them correctly, you'll get 4 points. Your acceptance tests or your R shells, have you got all of them done? Yes, you'll get 4 points. If you have one of them missing, you might only get 3. Make sure that you get all 4 points. Your navigation of screens. Use this rubric. I always suggest that you go through the rubric before you submit a phase so that you can see if there's something that's mentioned here that you didn't pick up. Make sure that you would give yourself that. Or how do I get that marks? If you're not sure, ask your teacher. What is missing from my example that's going to stop you from getting 4 marks? Over here, your data dictionary. Have you done that? Have you done that? Have you done that? If you've done it, you're going to get all 4 points. Your interfaces, your validation. You see how many points the RPO is. That's a whole 16 points. Make sure that you do all those different aspects. Make sure that you look over here for examples of what you can do to get all the marks. Your coding. Have you used local and global variables? If you have, you're going to get points there. Have you used proper names for your components and your variables? Yes, you're going to get points for that. Make sure that you go through this. Check every aspect of the rubric. Have you got good notes? Are there comments to explain all the necessary parts? Is there explanation of your program of how it works? Make sure that you follow these examples. And then over here is just the general impression. Is it complete? Does it look professional? Did you have a good attitude? And your ability. This is going to come from your interview. How well could you explain the code? So hopefully you'll get as many marks as these as possible. Just take note over here, your learner declaration. So what you can do, say you can go and save this, or you can use like a PDF viewer like Microsoft Edge and just come here and you add text. For example, over here, you can go and just add your signature over here. So Mr. Long, if you want to add your signature, add the date, something like that. And then you can save it and put this into your folder structure. Just something that I would take note of is before you start, I would actually create a folder for your PAT. And in that folder, I would have a phase 1 folder and a phase 2 folder. And then I would put my document in the phase 1 folder, and in my phase 2, I'll put the actual program with my documentation and a copy of this with all of the stuff filled out. Or you could print it and scan it as well. So that's what I would do when you submit your PAT. So as I said, make a folder for your PAT. Inside that folder, make a phase 1 and phase 2 subfolder, and then put the relevant stuff in the relevant folder. Grade 10s, I hope that gave you an idea of what to do. We've got lots of videos that explain little aspects of PATs in general that can help you. You can go check out the YouTube channel for that. But the key thing, as I said, is use the PAT to show off your skills, number 1. Number 2, make sure that you follow the rubric as a guide. Go read the rubric before you submit. Make sure that you've done everything to get all those marks. And make sure that you do everything. Start creating good habits now of doing all parts of the PAT so that you can get as many marks as possible. This really can, and I'm being honest now, can bring your mark up at least 10% if you do well in your PAT. So use it as a way to bring those marks up. If you don't do the PAT, it's going to bring your marks down. So get stuck into grade 10s, go do the PAT, go think about your topic now, about what program you want to use for educational use. Go look at some examples and then start doing your phase 1. Good luck, everyone. Just a reminder, if you want to support the channel and get other updates whenever we post something new that could help you with your PAT, subscribe to @Mr. Long IT and Cat. Click on that subscribe button if you haven't done it. If you haven't, do it now, do it now. And remember, don't do it the long way, do it the Mr. Long way.